I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. Here we have roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Here.
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Accounted for.
That concludes roll call.
All right, next our city manager has a change.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. A couple of quick changes to the agenda. First, I would like to suggest that we move item 5 on your agenda, the Proclamation for Children's Day, up to number 3, so immediately after we're done here. And then I would also recommend striking item number 12 from your agenda this evening. We have some dueling opinions going back and forth, and I want to make sure it's right before I bring it back to council.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to move item 5 up to item number 3, reorder subsequently, and strike current number 12 from the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So next then, we have a lot of people in this audience who are waiting for their, hopefully, certificates. But first, we're going to read the proclamation for Children's Day. And Kareem, oh, there you are. Come on up here. Testing. Oh, it is on. All right. So we started this last year, and it was so successful, and hopefully it's going to continue. Thank you, Kareem, for bringing this to our attention. We're going to celebrate Children's Day. And this is the City of Mountlake Terrace proclamation in celebration of Children's Day 2025. Whereas we are reminded on this day to nurture, protect, and support all children in our lives, and whereas young people all around us exemplify compassion, tolerance, and protecting others, and whereas for over a century, countries around the world have promoted the well-being of children. Then, in 1925, International Children's Day was proclaimed in Geneva during the World Conference on Child Welfare, and whereas during April, the following places celebrate Children's Day: Taiwan, Hong Kong, Palestine, Bolivia, Haiti, Colombia, Turkey, and Mexico, and I might add Japan. And whereas in Taiwan and Hong Kong, Children's Day is celebrated April 4th, emphasizing the importance of future generations along with endeavors to promote their general well-being. The day features family-friendly functions, fun activities, and sporting events. And whereas in the Republic of Turkey, Children's Day is celebrated April 23rd. Traditionally, politicians hand over the seats to children for a day to govern, providing an opportunity for adults to listen to children's ideas. And whereas in Mexico, the Day of the Children is celebrated April 30th, when parents, schools, and business focus on making children feel special and loved through games, activities, and gifts. And whereas in the United States, April 24th is Take Your Children to Work Day, to empower young people to take bold steps toward their dreams, fostering the confidence and resilience they need to succeed. And whereas in Mountlake Terrace, the city provides parks, recreation, and open spaces for children to explore, encourages young people to participate in the civic process, and offers volunteer opportunities for youth. And now, therefore, I, Mayor Kyoko Matsumoto Wright, on behalf of the Mountlake Terrace City Council, do proclaim April 24th, 2025 as Children's Day. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I hope you have a few words to say.
Yes. I jotted down because I cannot improvise. I will start by thanking the parents for bringing children here, but I will address the children because today is your day. Today we gather not just to honor you, but to reflect upon your potential. You are the architects of tomorrow, and your minds and hearts will shape a world that is united, just, and full of promise. We stand at a time when the forces of division and discord seek to weaken us, but the strength of humanity lies in its unity. The true progress of mankind is not measured by material wealth or power, but by the strength of its hearts and the harmony between its members. The true greatness is not found in the pursuit of power of dominance, but in the service of others. The true greatness is found in love, in justice, and in the strength to build a world where all are treated with dignity and respect. And you, as the next generation, can carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. Do not be swayed by the forces of division, but rather be guided by the light of kindness and the principle of oneness of humanity. Just as the flowers of a garden each possess unique colors and fragrances, so too does humanity. We are different in many ways, but it is in our diversity that we find the beauty of life. Every person, no matter their background, culture, or belief, has something of value to offer the world. And you, the children, will bring the world closer together. You are like a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Inside each of you lies a treasure trove of potential, talents, and dreams that are yet to be discovered. Look within and unearth this treasure. Allow your gems to shine brightly, not only for your own good, but for the good of all humanity. Walk forward with love in your hearts and with the knowledge that you are the future. Let the world see your light and know that it will shine brighter every day. Your destiny is not just to inherit the world, it is to transform it. And in that transformation, to bring about a future of peace, unity, and progress for all. You are already capable of great things, and you can continue to grow. Always trust that you have the potential to do great things. When in doubt, just remember that the strength you need is already within you. Against the gloom of a stormy sky, how bright the light that gleams from your hearts. Happy Children's Day to you and to all the children across the world, who are the hope and promise of our shared future as one humankind.
And I would like to have all of the children come on up to receive their certificate. It's actually a copy of the proclamation. And for those of you who came later, you missed them giving their...
No homework.
No homework. They want to change the laws of the city or the state, and so they did it, and they wanted no homework. Okay. Single file, whatever. Who wants to be first? Here you are. You can just walk around. Here you are. Thank you for coming. Here you are. Are there any parents here that would like to have their own copy? Anyone else? And you also missed the dance, and maybe Kareem can explain what the dances were the history of the dances that they did, but it was incredible.
Oh, the children's dance?
The children's dance.
There was a children's folk group. They just did, I think it was 5 dances from northeastern, I guess, eastern Black Sea region. So it was Actually, they're going to Canada now. They're performing everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and happy Children's Day. All right, so next on our agenda is public comment.
No one signed up in person or to comment remotely, and any written comments were given to council.
All right. Okay, next will be the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, just a couple of things to mention tonight. First, our Financial Sustainability Task Force recruitment is underway, and that closes tomorrow afternoon at 5. But as of today, we have 26 applications and letters of interest from people who are interested in participating on that task force. We will be going through that, through those applications, and then coming back to you on May 8th for selection of the task force members. Then, next, I wanted to mention Saturday, 9 a.m. to noon, we have Arbor Day in action down at Ballinger Park. And there will be lunch provided afterwards, so that's going to be great. And finally, wanted to introduce our new economic development program, economic development manager. Ryan Doss is here, and he's going to say a few words from the podium. Excited to welcome Ryan and see what great things he can do for our community.
Thank you, Jeff, and good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Ryan Doss, and I have the great privilege to serve as the new Economic Development Manager for the city of Mountlake Terrace. I recently relocated from Texas, so I'm new to the state, I'm new to this community, but I bring with me a Master's of Public Administration, 5 years of local government experience, with primarily a focus on economic development. So I really look forward to working with all of you closely and collaborating as we advance the vision and the goals that are outlined in the city's strategic plan that this council approved last year, as well as the economic development strategic plan. I think both of these together give us a strong framework to guide our efforts as to make our city's economy grow, but also support the businesses that already call Mountlake Terrace home. So thank you for the warm welcome, and I look forward to getting ready to work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all I have this evening. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there, Councilmember Woodard?
I just wanted to welcome our new colleague to the city and also say what a very quick learner you are to know not to sit there unless you wanted that audience behind you that way. But welcome to the city. And I hear we have some things in common, so I look forward to talking with you very soon here. But welcome.
Anyone else? Well, welcome. All right, so next on our agenda is the presentation of the asset management practices with the wastewater system. Oh, there you are, with Gary Shimmick and maintenance worker to Rex Fishbach. Oh, we have more.
And team.
Yes. You can just pull it up.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Gary Shimmick, your Public Works Director. I think this is my first time here after my successful probation. Thank you, Jeff and Carolyn, for keeping me on. Appreciate it. Hopefully you'll be here many more years to come. Make sure I can now forward these slides. Oops. A little bit of a delay here. Okay, so this is going to be the first in a series of asset management briefings, and I'll get into a little bit more about refresher what asset management is in a second. But this is going to focus on our sewer system today. So purpose here today and for the future briefings, probably once a quarter, will be to talk about our innovative techniques related to asset management. So again, what is asset management? We've got a picture of a life cycle on the right side. So in terms of assets, I'm going to give you an example in a couple of minutes about a car, but just for city assets, you can think of a pipe, pump station, something that costs more than $5,000 and has an extended period of life that helps us do our business. And the cycle here shows from identifying the need to purchasing it all the way through replacement. So there are a lot of techniques we use here at the city across all departments to promote the efficient use of staff and financial resources. And again, that to me is the heart of asset management. It's, again, to repeat that, the efficient use of staff and financial resources. And again, you're going to be seeing, for example, the next quarter we'll be talking about facilities and their approach to using asset management. Today we're going to talk about sewer system and a pretty cool tool called Sewer Line Rapid Assessment Tool, or SLRAT. So kind of cute. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about just how this presentation relates to council goals. I'm going to give you a little bit, a little bit more detail about asset management refresh, and then Rex is going to take over and talk about the technology, how we use it, how we inspect, what are the results, and then the anticipated benefits and costs for this. And since I mentioned Rex's name, to my left, we also have Sean, who's our water and sewer supervisor, and then Grant, who is also on Sean's team. And that's one thing I hope you're going to see too through these briefings, not only the directors who are in charge of the work, but also the staff that are doing the innovative work. I think it's really important to, as I know they're looking forward to this. Hope that loosened you up a little bit. Thank you. Okay, so council goals. How does this work relate to council goals of asset management? So really under the responsible governments to ensure desired service level, and then a step deeper, investing in systems and technology to enhance efficiency and minimize risk, and ensuring cost-effective delivery. So again, there's all flavors of asset management. We've been doing it for a long time, but we're trying to be, up our game a little bit and using new techniques, right, to help us again. In some of the cases, you can say spend a little money to get new software, new technology that will end up saving a whole lot in the future, right? So what I really want to stress is there's a lot of cool stuff on the market that has asset management on it, but if it doesn't have good return on investment, we're not interested, right? We are interested in purchasing technology that's going to really help us be efficient. And it's a little bit of a refresh before handing it off to Rex. So I just thought of an example, something typically most of us have, maybe not all of us, but a vehicle, okay, car, motorcycle, whatever you have. So you can use asset management very loosely or not at all or to an extreme. So let's think about I want to give you the extremes here. So one way you might think that you could save just a lot of money after buying a new vehicle, say me, I just bought a new Subaru, say, well, I bought the money, it's a lot of money to put out there, I'm just going to drive it and I don't want to spend anything on maintenance or repair. I'm just going to go blind, and when I really need to do it, then I'll do it, because I spent a lot of money buying that car. So I don't care, no oil change, no nothing, right? So you're saving a lot in the front, and you just bought it. Okay, 4 months comes around, and then your engine's dead, and now you don't have a car. So you sure tried to save money, but you ran it to the ground. So that's one, really no asset management, right? You just have it and purchase it, and we're just going to run it in. Other extreme is, well, okay, every week I'm going to change the oil, I'm going to change the spark plugs, I'm going to give it a wash in the engine, going to change the tires. Well, that's great, but you're kind of throwing money away by doing that much to protect your vehicle, right? Where you really, it's not gaining you that much. So what we're trying to do in our asset management refresh, and with this example, somewhere in the middle, right? That we've made a big purchase, and then we're going to be smart about how we maintain it. We want to do maintenance at the right time, and then we want to know when that asset's likely need to be replaced so we can save up for it and not be surprised, right? So that's just a little feeling, you know, about what you're going to be seeing in these briefings. So maintenance at the right time, replacement at the right time. And that really does take a lot of inspection, you know, data collection, and then analytics. But again, we believe that extra cost that you're going to see in all of these cases results in long-term savings. So that's kind of what asset management, you know, in a nutshell is and what you'll be seeing today. I think I've got one more slide before I hand it over to Rex. What Rex is going to be talking about today is part of a bigger piece of inspecting our major pipes across the city, and this is for wastewater and for stormwater. Again, you could just go blindly and not inspect pipes at all and only go fix them when there's a water main break or something's blocking it and causes an overflow. But by that time, you know, you might not be able to clean a pipe because it's so in bad condition. So what we try to do is inspect using a video camera of the conditions of all our pipes at least once every 5 years so we can see how they're doing. And what Rex will be talking about is a way to kind of, instead of just going about and doing, you know, one pipe every 5 years, a way to identify when we should do some of those sooner because there may be a blockage in there. So we can, again, saving time and saving resources by inspecting it and videoing it at the right time rather than just, you know, proactive. But this way, what you're going to see now is just a way to use our data a little bit more to help us save that time and investment. All right, Rex, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Keep on passing it now.
Yeah, exactly. Pass it on down the line.
Council, Mayor.
Closer to you.
Is that better? A little closer? Okay.
Now we can hear you.
Thanks for having me. So what we got here is a picture of our SLRAT equipment that we currently use. It comes in two parts. So the first part's on the left, we call it the transmitter, and the part on the right is the receiver. So the transmitter sends basically sound waves down from the manhole into the pipe, and once the receiver has collected the data from the transmitter, it will calculate a score out for us between 0 and 10, with 0 being the worst and 10 being the best. There's a few things that can affect the scoring on this, as you can see on the picture, is the blockage, but also roots in the pipe will affect the scoring. Protruding taps that come in, grease, people flushing things they shouldn't, like flushable wipes and towels, can affect the scores on that also. A little bit further down in our presentation, we'll talk about our city scores that we've achieved. You go to the next slide. Currently, we're inspecting 50% of the system per year. We're prioritizing scores of 4 and below. This picture right here is just a standardized inspection form. Just gives us time, date, location, and will give us a score. The picture on the bottom with the green line, that's a completed inspection, and the green means it was a good inspection. And a good score usually is between 7 and 10. Next slide. After going through 3,249 inspections, we identified, located, and gave each inspection a map number. This allowed us to break the city map into 20 quadrants and come up with an average score for each of the 20 map quadrants. We will use the scoring from the 20 quadrants to identify our starting point, then find and correct pipe deficiencies in the sewer system. Based off scoring, we will start with the lowest scored quadrant and begin our CCTVing and jetting plan to find pipe deficiencies and repair them. This is the inspection results graph. So on the bottom of the screen, you can see our map. We have map 1 through 20. And the blue part of the graph is the overall score for that pipe, or for that map quadrant. The red is poor scores, which is 0 to 3. The yellow is fair, which is 4 to 6, and the green is good, which is 7 to 10. If you see the numbers inside the colors for each map, that's how many inspections came back in that range. So for example, if you look at map 14, the overall score for that map was 6.67, but we had 13 inspections come back that were poor, 94 that were fair, and 244 that were good. If you have questions, map 16 has 0. That's because that was Ballinger Lake, and we don't have any sewer that runs through there. So, next slide, please. This is an overview map of all of our inspection results from basically the last 3.5 years. As you can see, we've inspected roughly 144 miles of sewer. It's mainly green and yellow. We were going for supersonics colors, just happened to work out that way. So the green and yellow is fair and good, which is good. You can see a little bit of slivers of red, which is poor scores. And if you happen to see any white, that was probably a blockage that we cleared. Next slide, please. This is some more inspection results. So the 3,216 total measurements, I'd like to focus more on. We came in at 94% of all of our inspections were between good and fair, which I think puts us in a pretty good spot, compared to 6%, which was only poor and blocked. We've inspected 761,460 feet so far, and of that, we've determined 91,513 feet needed to be cleaned, which basically equates to 12% of our pipes. So keep in mind that 91,000 is scores of 4 and below. So in the past, we used to go on a 5-year to 7-year cycle where we just jet the entire city, whether, it's kind of jetting blindly, you're just cleaning the entire system. So we've been able to be more focused on finding areas that actually have known problems, and so we can concentrate on, getting rid of blockages before they happen. Next slide, please. This is the anticipated benefits and savings. So estimated savings over the last 3.5 years. So the estimated cost to clean recommended pipes is roughly $92,000 to $183,000, compared to the estimated cost to clean all pipes is $761,000 to $1.5. And the estimated savings after assessment is $669,000 to $1.3. So like I just referenced previously, the top number is just focusing on scores 4 and below, where we know, hey, there's grease in this line, there's debris, whatnot. Let's pay our attention to this. And the next one is just going around slowly around the city and jetting every single line in the city, which the problem with that is, you could be way up here jetting, and it takes you 5 years to get over here, but meanwhile, you have backups occurring, starting to grow on all these other spots. And not to mention with our aging infrastructure, on our sewer pipes, just randomly jetting sewer systems, even though it's clean, can have more harm than benefit at this point for us. We didn't add in, so on the bottom, it's a reduction of potential overflows, which is backups. There was really no way to calculate the savings the city's seen from that, from us finding backups before they actually happen. In the past, we were more reactive, so now we're being more proactive on this. And I think the last thing I'd like to point out is the additional benefits is that it seems we've saved roughly 2.7 to 4 million gallons of water by just focusing on trouble areas instead of just going around the entire city. And with that, I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or discussion, we'd love to hear it.
Is any, Councilmember Salmore?
I was just going to ask, I know the infrastructure, and I think I've told the story before, we used to have people come in with the cement sewer pipe, and it was cement, and it was broken, and they plump it down on the table and said, rats are coming out of it, and rats are coming out of toilets, and so So sorry about that, but it got me thinking, when you're going in and inspecting, are you putting any plastic tubes down there to line those cement pipes just to get them to last a little bit longer? Because we were told the cost of replacing all the sewer lines in Mountlake Terrace would be astronomical. And so I'm just wondering, are we doing some patches to get us by a little bit longer? Because just a simple project that we had, I think over on 66 was like $3 million. And people wonder why water rates and sewer rates are so high, and we forget about the infrastructure and how old our city is and what we have to repair. And I know those costs can be astronomical.
I couldn't have paid you enough to ask that question. Thank you. It's a great one that I want to respond to. So yes, we are actually, we do, there's not one way to replace a pipe. You can actually, and we do what you're called lining. In some cases, you can't because the pipe's so broken. But it's interesting that you asked this because one of the next things, Rex is really talking about, blockages and then cleaning. One of the next things we're going to be coming back to you about is the actual repair of pipes. So you actually, once you put when you TV the pipe, you do that after it's cleaned, and then you get you'll get a score, right? And what you can then see is how bad are the cracks, right? Or if there's a big sag in the pipe. But you have to do this cleaning first to do that. So there's a methodology to that we're going to bring back. But once you look at that and then you see what type of repair is needed, exactly, then that's the case. Some you can line, some you have to replace. But we're always looking at a way to line it, because we talk about asset management, that's why it's a perfect question. You then can extend the life, basically. Instead of a pipe lasting 50 years, now maybe it's going to go 70 because of that. And that wasn't always the case. People didn't believe in lining, they didn't think it was good or this and that, but it's been proven. So yes, that's exactly, something we look at as just what is the best way to replace when something is truly broken.
And we've had that conversation, Gary, at our retreat about the wipes that you brought up.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And we saw the big picture down at the treatment plant of this big, I want it goopy stuff, but, and you were talking, and this was kind of interesting to me, that they won't write on the packages, do not flush. And
Right.
I just thought, what? And after seeing that, and we had that conversation, it's eye-opening because people don't realize how much it costs to have their pipes replaced. I had to have it in the front yard, and I see a lot of that going on. In fact, Glenn Bernard and I had we used to have these big, long conversations about how people would call up and they would get, the city could come out into so much of their yard, and then after that, it's up to them.
Yes.
So if they block it up with
Yes.
those wipes, we're talking like $30,000.
Yes.
It's horrible. Are we getting a lot of calls for people to come out and look at the pipes on the city side of it at
Can I
all?
have you answer that one?
Yeah, we get calls from people getting backed up in their house. What we usually do is we'll go out there and investigate, make sure our main lines are clear. If they have it clean outside of their house, in their yard, a lot of times we can take our push camera and just push and see what's going on. The issue in the past is they'll have a problem, they'll call somebody out, and they'll push that problem out into the city's problem. So we have a code, basically, it's up to the property owner to keep their line free and clear. But if there's a defect or a break in the pipe, the city will fix that section. A lot of the times, it's soft plugs from people, from flushable wipes. Efficiency toilets, you're not getting as much flow to help push that through the system. So it starts building up and building up and building up and building up. But it'll be pushed out fairly easy. It's the roots that are the problem with hard plugs. But most of the ones we see is the flushable wipes, the towels. Just because you can flush a toy down the toilet doesn't mean, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
It's going to be an
yeah.
expensive repair.
Yeah, but we don't get a lot of calls for backup, but we always tell them, if there's an issue, please call us first, and there might be something we can do for you before you have to start spending all this money on plumbers.
Yeah,
and
and I
whatnot.
want to thank you on that, and because when Glenn and I had this conversation, there's so many people that don't realize what's going on, and the city can come out, and you've saved people so much time and a lot of money, so thank you for being proactive on that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all. Appreciate the presentation and you being here. I did have a question. So with the quadrant approach, given that there are red, there are poor scoring pieces of the system in every quadrant, I guess how do we think about that, and what's the impact of that when we have, maybe a section of, the line that is scoring really poorly, but the overall quadrant is doing okay, to where it doesn't fall into our list of covered quadrants for the year, or the next year, or the next, 10 years. I guess what are our long-term plans about how to address those sections?
Yeah, I think we can combine in this, but I think, when our crews look at, the video and what's actually going on, that if there's something that is going to score so bad, we're going to get to that. I would think, let's just use one of the examples here on map 8, where you have actually 109 that are great, 101 that are good, and 10 that are poor, that we may get to those 10, while we're, it's kind of a twofer, I'd say. We'd start on, let's say, the worst quadrant, which is, I think you were telling me number 607. So we'll be focusing on that. But hey, let's clear some of these reds as well from the other ones. And, this is where it gets to be really interesting when we come back to you too, talking about risk. Mm-hmm. If there's a red pipe right there, but it's in a field where if it backs up, and it's not going to get to any water course, we can let that go. If it's under major crossing, let's get that, right? And right by next to a creek, then let's get to those. So I think I'm assuming you guys probably use those two things, like the score, how bad it looks, and what the potential consequences are.
Yeah, to go back to your question. So when we get a score that's in the reds, 4 and below, usually it's that day. We go out and it's jetted to take care of that issue. And then we make a list, and once we have, say, 10, we go out and we TV it and jet it. So we put our focus on that. So this quadrant, this whole thing it's a different way we're going to go about it. But we're still taking care of the low scores basically immediately. And then it just allows us more time to, hey, this line's got roots in it, let's TV it and root cut it at the same time so we can pull the roots. In the past, we used to just come through and we would root cut it, and you'd blindly do it without a camera, and you're like, oh, that's great. And so you have roots coming down, and it clears it a little bit, like finger roots. They grow right back. But now we're going and taking the aspect of let's TV it. We bring in our chain cutter and a root cutter, and we're able to pull the roots out of the joints. So it's given us, instead of it growing back in, say, 2 months, it's taking a year to grow back. So we're putting those on like, hey, this is a 6-month list. This one's 8 months. This one's a year. Let's get back to those areas. So it's a long process, but hopefully that answered your question.
No, that's phenomenal. Thank you. I appreciate the answer, and appreciate knowing that those red ones are a high priority, even if they're in an area that maybe overall is not. So, and very exciting to hear that there's such a change in how we're approaching the management of those. That is very neat. So I appreciate the presentation and the work. Thank you.
Councilmember Page.
Thank you. Here we go. I get that you're in a attention required fix-it mode, and you're able to see what items or what places, what maps need to be addressed immediately. But the question that I have is kind of twofold. One, how long does it take to actually inspect a map, and how much does that cost compared to, and if you have in place or plan on having in place a preventive maintenance inspection schedule that will allow you to be looking ahead of or plan ahead of each one of these maps so that you can figure out, well, what do we need? For your example, when you started off your discussion, what's available based upon our PMIs to to be ahead of getting into the yellow or getting into the red without having to work on one end and then have to jump over to someplace else.
Yeah, this, Greg, we were going to get along very well. I love that question. So what we're going to be doing a little bit differently going forward is, collecting and compiling all of this data that we're having about the how often we're maintaining it currently, structural condition, and we are in the midst of, and you'll see us rather soon, coming to purchase an updated asset management software program. And that's exactly what we want to use this data for, is how once we have a baseline of a year or so, then we're going to be creating what and you just exactly call it preventative work orders, right? So each pipe eventually will have a recommended frequency of maintenance. So there won't be any guesswork anymore. Now, that may change over time because of conditions, or if we line the pipe, but that's exactly where we're headed. So each pipe will have, how often should we clean it, right, and inspect it, and then even cooler than that is when do we expect it to be its end of useful life, based on how often we're cleaning it, when the pipe, what age it was, the material. So that's where we're headed to. So then we can then every year be showing you two graphs. One is, hey, here's how often we're cleaning, and this is how we're going around the system. But then we'll be able to show you a 20 to 30, 40-year graph of when we're likely to need to replace these or line, right? One of those two. So that's eventually what we're hoping to come back to you, with and show. But this is, everything that those 3,249 data points is what we're going to be putting into that new system. So then we'll be learning from that.
Great, thank you. That's what I was hoping to hear. I think that's what the city needs to be hearing is, we know we got to fix things, but, what's next, to her point, and that's the way to do it, the PMIs.
Yes.
That's where your savings is going to come in big time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. Two comments and then a recommendation. Let me begin by just saying it's great to have you all in this space. I'm a big fan of your work. Not even joking there. I wanted to double back to the idea of the liners. As a resident who lost his entire side sewer, that liner works. I can't imagine how many thousands of dollars it saved us just by not having to excavate the pipes. So just putting that out there, and that will lead back to the recommendation. I want to move over to slightly different, which is the work you do above ground. I had the great honor, and I do mean it that way, of arriving home as the SL rat was in front of my house. Yeah, that was my reaction. I was so like, yeah, baby. That said, I recognize you all are working. You got, in teams no less, so you got a particular timetable that you're on and everything that goes along with that. And I sheepishly made my way over and start talking to one of our colleagues. I'm embarrassed I cannot remember his name, but what I wanted to communicate to you all was how amazing he handled that situation. It had to be near the end of his day too. He easily could have looked very frustrated, and you can pick up on that. We all know we can. And there was nothing there that said, don't ask me more questions. That said, which is where I'm leading to the recommendation, and going back to that beautiful map that we had, meaning that you're all over the place, it dawned on me as we were walking through here, and even in that moment, that I would have been happy with a QR code that I could have scanned, left him to do his work, and then I could learn more about it. And I'm wondering, because I know I'm a super nerd, I can't be the only one that thinks that way, and then we have quite a few water-related issues, I'm going to call them, that we're going to have to educate the residents on why it's happening. And I'm wondering if you all can't have a role in that, because you're already out doing this mapping, and rather than us stopping you from doing your work, be like, oh, that's great questions, thank you for that, scan this code, and it might send them to bigger conversations that we have to have, not just what the SL rat is doing. So just kind of putting that out there, that you all are all doing a great job anyway. But I know I took 10 minutes of his time that he probably did not have, but he politely did it, and they did their job. He had no idea who I was, for the record. So at the end, when I told him who I was, I'm sure he went, well, I really handled that well. And I said, yeah, just be yourself. You don't got to worry about who's in front of you, you know? So in that regard, I'm really looking at it as you all being ambassadors, creating more ambassadors, because look at all the distances you've all have been. And I know people are interested in this for no other reason than it just looks cool. So just putting all that out there, come on, comments, but recommendation to maybe put this to some type of use. Other than the great use it's doing.
Anyone else? Did you want to? Well, I'll ask that. So there are several sections that are red. What happens to be right by my house?
What have you been flushing?
But it's the one on the very top right, red, yeah, that one. Oop, top right.
Oh, top.
Yes. So does that mean that you're going to be looking into that one a little bit sooner than some of the others? Because I'm wondering, what are we doing in our neighborhood that is?
I mean,
That's 48th, right?
yeah, so without looking at the date of when it was, it could have already been taken care of.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
assuming it was taken care of, unless it just happened last week or,
Well,
This
part of it
morning
was
or
taken
not.
care of when you put in the sidewalk.
okay.
Yeah, but I think any, and that's what I probably didn't emphasize that enough when we were talking on here. Any red typically, is going to be taken care of, within days because of the potential backup, right, of a claim. We just, if you think about regulations, right, why we must do that really is through, under the Clean Water Act, we are to have zero overflows. Period. Now we're, if a private property owner has overflow due to their own side sewer, that doesn't count against us. But anything, we're not supposed to have any that get to creek. So that's why it's kind of a case where it's our protocol when it's that low of a score to get it. And if we find, if you were to find that, oh, wow, it's not just roots, there's a huge gash in the pipe, right? That's when we either, okay, we've got to replace this, and that's when we would, do an emergency repair if needed. But yeah, red typically means we're going to get there really quick.
All right. Well, just kind of curious because I didn't think we had a problem. Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you so much, and thanks
Thank you.
everybody for coming.
Thank you.
All right, so next on our agenda is the presentation on the draft Middle Housing Code amendments with Christy Osborne and team, because there seems to be a lot.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Christy Osborne, Community and Economic Development. I have Heidi with me from Methuen and Mackenzie from Echo Northwest. We're working on some code updates for middle housing and design standards, and I won't really go over the staff report, except to say this is work that we have been working with the Planning Commission on for the last several months. You'll be seeing it after they have their public hearing on these documents. By law, we have to have these sections of code updated for zoning by June of this year, as mandated by the state. So we're working to accomplish that. So you'll be seeing the zoning portions of this in June, and then we'll be coming back to you in July and August for the housing action plan portion of this. And then you'll be seeing more of us throughout the year as we come back with some additional zoning that we're going to need to do, as well as a second part of this, and then some other work that we're doing for critical areas and such. So this is going to be multi-phased as we implement our comp plan that you all adopted back last year in October, Vision 2044. So with that, we will, okay, good. We'll get started. You guys have a really long agenda, so let's just get right to it and show you what we're up to. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Chrissy said, my name is Mackenzie. I'm a project manager with Echo Northwest, and today we're going to share an update on the draft standards that we've been working on. Go to the next slide. The next slide as well. Okay, so just a quick overview. So we'll start off with what we've heard so far, both from community engagement and the Planning Commission. I'll talk briefly about the state requirements and some of the feasibility analysis that we've done about the market context in Mountlake Terrace. And then my colleague Heidi from Methuen will share some of the draft district and design standards. And then we'll end by talking a little bit about the upcoming housing action plan and end with next steps. So starting with what we've heard so far.
It's taking a second.
There we go. Pause for dramatic effect. Okay, next slide as well. So we held on March 26th a community workshop. I think many of you attended as well. Thank you. So many members of the general public came and talked with us and shared feedback, as well as we gave a brief presentation about the project. We are also currently holding developer interviews to get feedback on the draft standards that we are sharing with you tonight. Some major feedback themes that we've heard so far from the public are there's a desire for housing variety, affordability, and accessibility in Mountlake Terrace. There's strong support for increasing housing density, especially in the R3 and R4 zones in your comprehensive plan. There's strong interest in removing barriers for building ADUs, and walkability, design, and a sense of place are very important to your residents. We've also met with Planning Commission 3 times. This is a very high-level summary of hours of conversation, but I believe there's a more detailed slide in your packet. That's a hidden slide in this presentation if you're interested in hearing more. But some themes that we've heard are they are also interested in building scale by zone and density, allowing a diversity of middle housing types. Affordability and small units at attainable price points is key. Part of that is encouraging cottage housing. They're also interested in reducing setbacks, but also want to make sure that they retain privacy in rear yards. Reducing parking counts and garage widths from what is existing. Encouraging mid-block connections to encourage walkability in walkable neighborhoods, and incentivizing tree retention. So I'll just briefly touch on the state requirements. I'm sure you've heard these several times at this point, so I'll just quickly go over them. So Mountlake Terrace is planning as a Tier 2 city, which means that under House Bill 1110, Mountlake Terrace needs to allow 2 units per lot or 4 units per lot if it's within a quarter mile of a major transit stop. In Mountlake Terrace, that is only the light rail station, or 4 units per lot if at least 1 unit is what's considered regulated affordable housing at either 60% or 80% AMI. However, this does not apply to very small lots under 1,000 square feet. There's also another piece of legislation that the city is complying with, House Bill 1337, that addresses ADUs. And as part of the ways that that legislation interacts with House Bill 1110, Mountlake Terrace can choose to count ADUs or not to count ADUs towards the density requirements of 2 or 4 units per lot. There are also some parking requirements that are associated with House Bill 1110. So the city cannot require a maximum the city cannot require parking within half mile of a major transit stop. There's a maximum of 1 required parking space for units on lots that are less than 6,000 square feet, and a maximum of 2 required parking spaces per unit on lots greater than 6,000 square feet. This is not to say that a developer cannot provide more parking, and in many cases, the market would provide more parking because that's something that there's demand for in Mountlake Terrace. But this is just to say that the city cannot require, say, 3 parking spaces. So I'll briefly summarize our some of the analysis that we've done to inform the draft code. We did test fits as well as a pro forma feasibility analysis. The test fits are a way of modeling how different building types fit on typical Mountlake Terrace lots. So an example would be the duplex here on this slide. So these test fits reflect common middle housing patterns and help us understand how different housing types might be oriented on typical lots in Mountlake Terrace and how different development standards might support or inhibit different development types. So using these test fits and these constraints, we then did a pro forma analysis to test the relative market viability of these housing types. This is a high-level summary of relative market strength in Mountlake Terrace. So what we found is that detached large units, like single-family homes, are generally the strongest market type in Mountlake Terrace. There's a proven market for both medium and large detached homes, although there might be more limited demand at the highest end of the price range. There is also a strong market for townhomes and other similar side-by-side units. If possible, if the price is low enough, buyers do tend to prefer a detached unit. There's, the appeal of having your own yard, more parking, things like that. But given the proliferation of townhomes in Mountlake Terrace in recent years, there's definitely a market here for that type of housing. There's also a market for smaller, lower-priced homes in Mountlake Terrace, like cottage housing, although I would say less than for the side-by-side attached units. One caveat to that is that smaller units typically cannot absorb as much in the land costs and other fixed costs as larger units, which is why you tend to see them in larger packs, like you'll see like 6 or 8 cottages at once. For stacked rentals, so like an apartment building, there is demand for rental housing in Mountlake Terrace, but there are things on the building side of things, like the building code, and there are things that kick in at like 4 stories, and there's implications for small-scale rentals, so it's a little bit more complicated, and there are certain aspects of the way that all of these different regulations and the market interact to impact the feasibility for the small multiplex rentals. Condos are something that you typically don't see a lot in Washington State, or actually nationwide. There are certain construction defect liability challenges that are specific to condo developments. And so unless the condos are selling at kind of the very high end of the market, you typically don't see them being built. Next slide. So this is a chart that is from our actual pro forma analysis of the specific test fits that we analyzed. This chart shows our results in terms of residual land value, which is essentially the amount of budget a developer would have to purchase land after accounting for all other factors, including costs and revenue and certain returns. So essentially, the higher the residual land value shown here as a per square foot value, the higher the likelihood that the development is feasible. And so the key takeaway from this chart here is that increasing the number of units per lot increased feasibility, which was a consistent finding across housing types. So in the dark green, when we went from 4 townhouses to 6 townhouses, that increased the feasibility. Same for the orange, 6 cottages to 8 cottages. And when we tested a multi-unit apartment building, going from 14 units to 18 units also increased the feasibility. And so what this indicates to us is that development standards that allow denser development are an incentive in Mountlake Terrace. And then this is just a summary chart of all of the different housing types that we looked at. Highlighted in the orange are the most feasible types that we looked at, which were 2 detached homes on a lot, as well as townhomes. Noting that we did only show the denser form of the townhouses, cottages, and multiplexes from the last slide here, so that's a finding that's consistent with 6 townhomes, not necessarily 4. Also noting that duplexes and cottage clusters and multiplexes are also generally likely feasible here, although less so than detached houses and townhomes. And then, as I touched on a couple slides ago, smaller rental units, fourplexes and sixplexes, just likely aren't competitive, especially against these other types of development in the current market conditions. So these findings, they informed our draft code, both in setting the base code as well as the development standard bonus options that Heidi will talk about in just a second, that we have written into the code as an incentive for certain public benefits. So with all of that, kind of setting the groundwork, laying the basis, I will hand it over to my colleague Heidi to share an update on the draft code.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's great to be here tonight. I'm an architect and urban designer at Bethune, and this is my second middle housing code and very much a passion of mine. We'll get into detail about these draft standards. So the code framework approach that we and staff have chosen is similar to what you've used in other Mountlake Terrace districts and that other places use. And that's essentially a hybrid code. And what I mean by that is we're kind of doing this in two parts. We're revising your chapter 19.30 to primarily regulate the scale and density of development with common standards such as unit counts, height maximums, and basically yard setbacks. We're also creating a new chapter 19.32 for design standards, which is more about the look and the feel of development. The overall goals with the entire code is really to comply with the new laws, to complement your existing neighborhoods while increasing walkability and housing choice and basically affordability or attainability, and to make it easy to use. So House Bill 1110 that Mackenzie went over, she went over the density, but they also define 9 housing types, 6 of which you must pick for Mountlake Terrace. And those are in the white boxes on the right. So they include duplexes through sixplexes, townhouses, stacked flats, courtyard apartments, and cottage housing. On the right, the gray boxes also show common residential scale housing types that HB 1110 doesn't list. So things like a single family house or attached ADU or DADU and multiplexes. So the Planning Commission supports having a diversity of housing types in Mountlake Terrace, and they chose to allow all types here. But since those are very loosely defined, we worked with them to define 5 housing types for the Mountlake Terrace Code, and those are the ones you see on the left in the colors. So singles would be any detached unit. They could be in the front yard, they could be in the backyard. So examples would be single family or DADUs. Slots, this comes from the term slot home, which was coined in Denver, meaning townhouses that are kind of perpendicular to the street that run along a driveway slot. Those could be attached ADUs or duplex through sixplex, but really we think of these as townhouses, and you have many examples in Mountlake Terrace, so we wanted to make them a separate type. Rows are almost the same thing, but turned parallel to the street, where you often have an entry to each unit. This is a very common type in older cities that were developed with row houses. Stacks are units stacked one on top of the other, which can include many of those other types and multiplexes. And then courts is kind of a grouping of units around a shared open space. So those could include courtyard housing and cottage housing arranged around that big space. Okay, so I'll walk you through the highlights of that conventional code, the 19.30 chapter. Reminder, these are the conventional standards that primarily regulate scale, but they also contain development bonuses. We have revised your existing chapter. We've also incorporated pieces of the RM zone chapter into this, but we moved out all the parking standards to the parking chapter, which seemed very logical, and then we made that new design standard chapter. Okay, this slide summarizes 4 dense pages of code, so it's dense itself. Overall, we're using the zones that you defined and mapped during the comp plan process. So you got us off on a really good running start. As the zones increase intensity from R1 to R4, their maximum densities and height also increase. And then their setbacks, their front yards and backyards and side yards, decrease slightly. So this keeps smaller scale buildings in R1 and then scales up as you go through R4. Building heights can also be increased by bonuses in each zone. And note that based on the Planning Commission feedback, we are separately regulating the height of buildings in the front and the rear portions of the lot. We talked a little bit about having a separate dadu height, and we thought, well, in a lot of cases, you may actually want larger units in the backyards. You have a lot of smaller houses in Mountlake Terrace. And so rather than just saying a dadu should be this height, maybe we say the backyard height should be lower so that there's a little more light and air and privacy in backyards. And so that's how to think about that one. The draft code also allows more lot coverage when more units occur on a lot. And similarly, that is also bonused. So your lot coverage increases per zone when there are more than 6 units in R3 and 4. Okay, that's a lot, and we can come back to it if you have questions as we go. So regarding lot coverage, the Planning Commission opted to use lot coverage together with height to regulate scale in Mountlake Terrace. Sometimes we use a combo called FAR, floor area ratio. I'm sure you've heard about this in other zones. But really together, that lot coverage, which is kind of the horizontal, and the height together come up, kind of regulate the scale in each of these zones. Lot coverage is, I should have said immediately, it's really essentially the percentage of the lot that's covered by buildings. Right now, you allow about 40% lot coverage in your lowest zones, but the single-family houses tend to take only half of that coverage. They might be 20 to 25% lot coverage. But in your townhouse zones, you allow 60 to 65% lot coverage, and they do reach them. So you see on the example on the right, 63% lot coverage. These are just more examples. I'm not showing our proposed table here, that's in your packet, but we're proposing to reduce the lot coverage in your lowest zones to 30%, but maintain up to 50 or 60% for more than 6 units in those larger R3 and R4 zones. This is really to avoid large out-of-scale houses that could happen if we allowed too much lot coverage and only a small number of units. Okay, Councilmember Woodard, you said you were wonky in the last presentation about the sewer, and so maybe you can, we all can keep up on lot coverage here. It's pretty wonky. Okay, bonuses and flexibilities. So the draft code includes a bonus for affordable housing and what we're calling flexibility for 3 other public benefits. The affordability bonus is established and inspired by HB 1110. So we essentially grant more density and height, as well as reduced setbacks and parking for the public benefit of providing a certain percentage or number of affordable housing units on the site. Mackenzie went over the state bill earlier. In practice, this bonus is likely to be used by developers building 100% affordable units on the site. And so a density bonus, which is coupled with that added height and reduced setbacks, helps those developers reduce their land cost and build more units at less expensive price points. Okay, tree retention was another top priority from the Planning Commission, since you have wonderfully mature, beautiful trees that really create a sense of place in Mountlake Terrace. And so we're proposing more height and smaller setbacks in exchange for preserving 25% of existing significant trees on the site. Okay. This slide illustrates an area of Mountlake Terrace that could use more connectivity through a bonus. Generally, 200 to 300 foot long blocks are considered walkable. And some of these are 1,200 feet long, so not very walkable. So this connectivity flexibility allows relaxed height and setbacks in exchange for providing what we're calling mid-block connections that go through blocks that are longer than 300 feet, that may connect cul-de-sacs back to the grid or connect them to each other, and that extend existing streets through long blocks. So, and then flexibility would also be granted if you provide alleys at the rear of the lots. So each lot would essentially dedicate half of the typical alley width, hoping that the neighbor provides the other half and neighbors build up alleys over time. This is an existing middle housing neighborhood that kind of illustrates how that can be done. This has blocks over 500 feet long, and over time, one middle housing project at a time, without requiring those connections, the area has developed this informal network of mid-block connections, and so they shorten that walking distance between places. They also benefit from 2 partial alleys that connect the mid-block connections when they don't align across the entire block. So you can imagine going down this blue street to the alley, to this mid-block connection, up the street and through the connections. So this is the approach we took in the draft standards. The connections would not be required, but they could be incentivized through height increases and setback reduction bonuses. And this is an area that could use your advice when you move to discussion. Essentially, is connectivity a priority you share with the Planning Commission? And if so, does this go far enough to encourage this community benefit? Some cities actually require where streets or connections need to go. ADUs, accessory dwelling unit standards, are consistent with House Bill 1337, which regulates ADUs in Washington State. You must allow 2 ADUs per lot, and we've chosen to count them as units in the density calculations. On the right, you see a provision that even if your current house maxes out lot coverage, you're still allowed those 2 ADUs. And then also consistent with law, they can be as large as 1,000 square feet. We're regulating height, setbacks, and parking the same as any building in the residential district, so they're not treated separately. Cottage housing in this draft code is a little simpler than it had been. We heard from the Planning Commission, as Mackenzie said, that we really want to incentivize cottage housing here. We now say that you need at least 6 units to make a cottage court. It used to be 8. And we're allowing 1 carriage house per 4 cottages. We discussed with the Planning Commission that maybe that should be encouraged if you retain more trees, that you could have more carriage houses. This matters since we're offering rear setback reductions for cottages that are 1 or 2 stories tall. Overall, cottages need to follow the rest of the code that we have been reviewing, as well as the design standards in the next chapter. Our approach to outdoor open space is fairly simple. To incentivize more housing production, and noting that yards are likely large enough when there aren't very many units on a lot, the Planning Commission prioritized open space requirements for projects with 20 or more units. And those require 10% of the lot to be given as open space. The exception is that those stacks, which could be condos or rentals, don't need to provide any open space. And this is because it's so hard to get these built. And historically, those multiplexes haven't had any open space, and they've been very successful. And then on the opposite end of that, courts have to have 20% open space because the HB 1110 law says that to be a cottage court, you need to have that. You can provide it as either common or private space, and they have different dimensions associated with those. And then roof decks can count towards the requirements, which is consistent with your current code. Parking. This is often a hot topic. But the Planning Commission really kind of agreed with themselves and liked the proposed approach of reducing your current standards to 1 stall per unit in the R1 through the R3 zones, with R4 going down to 0.75 stalls per unit. Again, this is not a maximum, it's a minimum, and developers or homeowners can provide more if they would like to. This is really to promote walkability and reduce curb cuts along the street edge, which also promotes street parking on many streets. For bonuses, reductions to 0.75 and 0.5 stalls per unit in R3 and R4 respectively are offered for affordable housing or tree retention to fit those extra units or trees on the site. Guest parking is required for projects over 20 units in R3 and 4. And then for driveways, we're proposing one 12-foot driveway per 50 feet of linear frontage. And this was a hot topic with the Planning Commission. We've also been discussing changing that to 18 feet per 60 feet of frontage. Because right now that you can do a 2-car garage with that 18 feet. Okay, 3 slides left. The design standards portion of the code, this is the part that regulates the look and feel of the residential zones. And this new chapter incorporates all the design standards language out of your former chapters, updates those, and adds quite a few new ideas, especially for the housing types we defined earlier that you hadn't had in your code before. There's a general it's mostly a general section that applies to all development in the residential zones. This chapter has a lot of text and many more precedent images, and we anticipate many more precedent images as it develops. And it regulates topics like building orientation to the street and pedestrian access from front sidewalks, which promotes friendly and walkable streetscapes. We also created ground floor use and garage design standards that center around the idea that at least half of every building frontage should be made up of what we're calling habitable space. So living rooms, offices, entries, not garages or mudrooms, things like that. Then, like most design standards, we're working on facade modulation and articulation standards to reflect residential and pedestrian scale and to emphasize individual units when possible. We had a discussion with the Planning Commission about striking the right balance between defining scale and details in buildings, but not requiring excessive articulation that can really look too busy on these small buildings or be too costly. The design standards also regulate facade transparencies or windows along the street and visual privacy between units on the same lot. As buildings get closer together, privacy issues become more important, as well as covered entries and legible addressing, which the police in the back rows would probably appreciate here. The design standards also have a section related to the unique conditions of each of those 5 housing types. As you can see in these 2 examples, we've defined a maximum building width and depths for each of these types to keep their scale in keeping with residential neighborhoods. And they also contain special standards for orientation and open space, as in the courts example, which requires minimum courtyard sizes and orientation of the units to those courtyards. Okay, we've gotten to the end of this part, so thank you for your attention. I'll pass it back to Mackenzie and look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just going to give a quick update about the upcoming Housing Action Plan, which is the second component of this project. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. A Housing Action Plan it translates the comprehensive plan, housing element goals and policies into specific strategies, actions, and priorities for implementation. So a lot of the housing element goals are being addressed either in full or in part by this Middle Housing Code update. And what this Housing Action Plan will address is kind of some of the remaining goals and actions and policies that are in the comprehensive plan and provide guidance for implementation. So these are the current housing element goals that we'll be looking at. Each one has associated policies. We'll be digging a lot more into that in future briefings that we give you. We will also, if you can go to the next slide.
Try.
Oh.
It didn't move. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so potential strategy categories to address some of these goals. These are just examples, but for example, actions to support the development of regulated income-restricted affordable housing, looking at alternative ownership opportunities, actions that can create more housing stability for households that are at risk of displacement. That could include preserving existing naturally occurring attainable or affordable housing, as well as actions beyond just the Middle Housing Code update that can support the development of a diverse range of housing types and price points. And a strategy for doing that could be fostering public and private partnerships, both locally within Mountlake Terrace as well as regionally. In the final report, we will include an analysis of all of the goals and policies that we recommend. That can include the relevant engagement findings, implementation actions and considerations, and equity analysis and strategies for mitigating any potential disparate impacts, who would take the lead for each implementation, as well as potential partnerships, as well as a consideration of timing and costs. The inputs into the housing action plan that we come up with, it'll be all of this analysis that we've done here, including the community engagement, the interviews. We'll be doing focus groups as well in the future, as well as the community workshop. And we'll be also doing research into best practices and case studies and similar in peer cities. A brief overview of next steps. This slide is specific, I think, to the draft code, which is coming up first. So we'll be incorporating any feedback from Commerce Review, which we are waiting on, as well as any feedback that we receive here. We'll be returning to the Planning Commission in May. We'll be doing a work session with them, followed by a special hearing. And we'll be returning to you all in June, on June 5th, to do another work session, another update about where everything has landed. And then later in June, we'll be returning again for adoption. After that, in the summer, in July and August, we'll be working on the housing action plan strategies. We'll be working with Planning Commission on those, and then later in the fall, we'll be coming to you with updates on that. So that was a lot of information. Thank you so much. We would love to hear your questions and comments.
All right. Before our Mayor Pro Tem gets to put his hand up, does anyone have any questions or comments? Wow, I guess you get to go. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm still trying to process all of the thoughts. So, I mean, it's a lot, and there's even more, I think, in all of the materials that were included as part of the packet. So appreciate all of the work. I'll start there because it's a significant amount of work. And I will say I would love to, I don't know exactly what our schedule looks like, but I guess it would be helpful for me to have time between now and when we're voting on a finalized plan to have another opportunity to have you back and to continue this conversation, because I do think there is a lot, and I think the more that we dig into it and the more we have conversations with community members, there may be additional questions, you know, and just it would be helpful, I guess, before we're looking at a final proposal to chat a little bit more. But I do have a couple of questions that I jotted down and as we were going through the presentation. And, you know, the first is, I guess, in terms of, I just want to make sure I'm following. So looking at the market strength of housing types, back on slide 13, that's development market strength, right? Not interest in the market?
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I feel like how it's labeled, like that could definitely be, you know, interpreted differently, and yes. I did interpret it differently until you presented it, and so that does make sense to me in terms of development feasibility. I think that is not, and I want to make sure it's important for, you know, folks to understand, that doesn't necessarily reflect interest of our community in terms of the types of housing that they might be interested in purchasing.
Yeah, that's an important point to clarify. The interest from the community is a factor, but this is about the overall, the market development feasibility from a financial perspective.
Perfect, thank you. And then could you just, so the fourplex and sixplex, I guess why are those not competitive marketing housing or housing types? I guess I don't know that I was completely following that, and like how a sixplex is different than like a townhouse development, for instance.
Yes, good question. So in Mountlake Terrace, you have apartment complexes that actually already have pretty large units, and usually when you have fourplexes and sixplexes, one of the reasons why they are competitive is because they have larger units compared to like a denser apartment building, and so they can charge higher rents because they're bigger. But the units that you have kind of are at the upper end of what you would see for like the bedroom types, like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and they tend to be in developments that have more amenities, like they have gyms, they have, a community space or, what have you. And so the rents that you could charge for the 4-plex and the 6-plex and things that are, they're just, maybe they're in more residential settings too. They're not near transit. They're not, near mixed use, walkable areas as much. So the rents that you can charge in this market specifically, because you have like the top, what would, normally be rents that are higher end of the market, are just at a level where they're bumping up against that. And because they don't have necessarily a competitive edge against those units, you just can't get rents high enough to offset the costs of development, and you don't have enough units to kind of amortize the land and the different fixed costs that you would have.
Interesting. Thank you. I appreciate the additional explanation. So the lot coverage piece, I feel like that is something that is definitely going to come up, particularly, so we're looking at a lot coverage that's lower than our current lot coverage is how I understand what you're presenting. I guess I'm curious if we've done an analysis of recent developments that have been over our new proposed limits. I guess I'd love to understand how, if these limits had been in effect over the last 5 years or the last 10 years, like how many developments that have moved forward that are already part of our community might not be part of our community. I guess it would help just in terms of understanding scale. So these are ones that would, and this is where like I can only do math so fast, so y'all, especially this time of night. So like, given, I don't know how many units each of these are, and there's no affordability in any of them. So like there's no bonus potential structure, but like, are these all examples of things that would no longer be allowed under our new proposed zoning?
I'm going to caveat this first because I'm not as familiar with exactly which zone, for previous zones translate to the new zones. Okay. But if these are all from the townhouse zone, and those are all in R3 or R4, these would all comply. They're all over 6 units. They would all be allowed to have 50% lot coverage. Now I need to get my chart out because that one says 53. Maybe we come back and talk about that a little bit. I think that's what you're suggesting, is like what is the spatial analysis of where these things are occurring, and are things going to be out of conformity?
Yeah, well, and just I think that helps give some context into the decisions we're making, right? If there are things that seem to already fit well into our community, are we limiting more than perhaps we want to future developments by these new proposals? And I think similarly, I guess I'd be curious how both the lot coverage and the rear yard setbacks, and I recognize, I think there's maybe that was just for the cottage, that it's different proposals. Like, how do those impact detached ADUs? I mean, you can build up to 2, detached ADUs, but you only have really limited lot coverage available. I guess I'm curious whether those things are actually going to pencil out, because I think what happens is lots of times, and I think we've seen this with our cottage housing, right? We're like, this is great. We would love to see this in our community. And then unfortunately, we move forward with a plan and the plan doesn't come to fruition the way we'd like to see it because we've inadvertently made it harder perhaps than we intended to. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand some of those proposals and the why behind them. I think that would be helpful too. I don't know enough about lot coverage at this point in time to feel like I, know that 30% is the right number. I would love to understand why 30% maybe was the right number for the Planning Commission. And so I think that would be helpful to understand too, kind of how we got to some of these numbers. But I guess I would be particularly interested, given the feedback from the community about the interest in ADUs, how some of these things might potentially impact their ability to actually come to fruition. And also just developments generally in terms of particularly the lot coverage piece, because that is so different than what we have currently. Other stuff, I mean, I guess, again, I'd be curious to hear design standards. I think, having spent a lot of time trying to read and understand how we, address affordability, and that's such a big concern for our community. I guess, how are we thinking about the approach to design standards and affordability? I think sometimes those things are at odds, right? And again, in terms of ensuring that we get the sort of growth that we're looking for. I guess I'd love to understand how we're trying to balance those things in terms of making sure that we have what we need to make growth, work for everyone, but also not being so onerous that it doesn't happen. And so would love to better understand just kind of our approach there and how we got to some of the recommendations we're making. And I think that's it for tonight, but I guess I'm excited about where we're headed. I appreciate all the work that's gone in here. I love all the pictures. Thank you. I will say, as somebody who is visual, like I'm very grateful for, being able to see what some of these examples look like. And I think the high level piece is really helpful in helping me to be able to explain to the community what is going on and for the community to understand some of the proposals that are at play. So I just really appreciate particularly kind of the thoughtful, like the categories that you have kind of put the various housing types into. I think that is going to be really helpful for our community as they go on this journey to learn with us. So excited to continue the conversation and appreciate all of the work.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback.
I'll just try to answer a couple of questions. So I think these are in the transitional and also in our current residential multifamily zones. And so we allow up to 60% lot coverage. So right now, this is not going to be impeded by that. I think this lot coverage discussion is that discussion of floor area ratios that the Planning Commission doesn't want to do versus kind of lot coverage and other standards. And so there's kind of that dynamic. We don't in the code currently count impervious surface. So for lot coverage, and so where you see access driveways or patios or those other things we don't count currently, we're not intending to count them moving forward. So I don't think this is not necessarily an impediment. I think more work needs to be done for the ADU question to just kind of see where that kind of lies and what that looks like. And a lot of that's going to depend on where the existing home is situated on a piece of property, realistically, of whether somebody could get one ADU or two ADUs on a piece of property, right? That's going to kind of vary, and most people are not going to tear down an existing single family residence to put an ADU. So, I mean, I think that's kind of its own separate thing. I don't think our intent and what we've said all along is if we truly want middle housing, then the standards can't be the same. You can't have the same setbacks. You can't have the same limitations. If you truly want to see middle housing, I think for us I think maybe, and I'm projecting on you, but I feel the same way. I'd like to have cottage housing. I think it would be cool. I would like to have 4plexes and 6plexes. I used to live next door to one and it was really cool. Why don't those pencil out? But I think that's why we do the work to do the performance to see, okay, this is what's actually not necessarily what we want. This is just putting that, not that we're not going to include it in our code, but we realize that this is going to be a little bit more difficult to achieve. So in that case, that's where we've put the flexibility in trying to incentivizing those things, because we do want to see more of those things that we don't have. Condos, we want to see those. We know that there's difficulty, but so how can we incentivize the things that aren't the townhomes? Not that we don't want townhomes, but the other things that we're not seeing right now outside of what we've typically saw, which is single family and townhome development. Because realistically, we haven't seen a lot of multifamily. We haven't seen any condo. We've seen very few accessory dwelling units, so anyways. Yeah.
Thanks, Christy. I appreciate it. And excited to see where kind of the continued work lands. And I guess just to kind of add to my comment, I mean, just for your example, because you use a 7,200 square foot lot, and that is the size of my lot, so I'm very familiar. But like, so for 2 units, even if we're just talking about like one detached ADU, like that's 2,500 square feet. I mean, so if somebody, I mean, like, I think we get into, that's a very small amount of coverage, right? In terms of like the total lot and, you know, the size that ADU can be based on potentially the current size of a house. And so, or even like the remodeling of a single family house, or a single family home. Like, I think this feels very restrictive. And I don't know if that's our intention, but I guess I would love to understand that better and what we are trying to accomplish by that. Because again, it is lower than our current. And I feel like as people remodel their homes, actually, I think where we're going to get the most pushback, I mean, we may not see the development we want, but I think we'll get pushback when people want to remodel their homes and they can't remodel it in a way that makes sense for them potentially. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to go back to, you said you wanted input on the connectivity. And so I don't know I can give anything other than in principle, which is, you know, we're doing our best to make this a walkable city. Our population is aging. I know other countries are very clear on the power of being able to just walk your elders and your elders to be able to walk around their block. So when you had, you know, there's a lot of information as we've been covering. But I would definitely be interested in hearing ways to incentivize creating these mid-connection blocks or alleys. And I'm not opposed to us pushing it to the point of saying we expect it in certain areas. So I'm not sure if that's the type of information you're looking for right now, but I would say that's how that landed on me, that seems in line with our values to start to break these down and to continue that around the city, not just in the city center.
Thank you. Right. Mayor Protem Wall, are you ready? I don't.
Are you guys ready? Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, no, first of all, thank you. I'm thrilled that we're doing this. Some of us have been asking for this for almost 10 years. And before the legislature mandated it. We've known, many of us here have known that we need to do this, that's the direction we need to go. I'm very excited to see that we're moving forward and making this happen. I'm very excited about what you presented. I think we're heading in the right direction. To me, the key is going to be the feasibility. And so I'm anxious to, I appreciate running the financial numbers. I think that was critically important, but also the feedback that we get from the development community when you do talking with them and the interviews you've got coming up and making sure that, not only is it financially feasible, but it's something that they're going to build.
Yeah.
That's absolutely.
And the demand is there. I mean, we can have a whole other discussion about affordability issues. We had, Chris Collier here, I guess, a few months ago. Weeks ago. I just heard from him yesterday in another meeting. Affordability is outrageous in this area, and we need, and it's a simple supply and demand, and we need more supply. And the best way to address the affordability issue is not only increasing the numbers, but ensuring we have the variety of different types of housing and choices. And so this is helping us get there. Just a clarification on, another one of the areas that Christy well knows that I've been asking about for a long time is the need to, you talk about the reason that we haven't seen a lot of ADUs and a lot of cottage housing is because we needed to rewrite our code and make it feasible and make it workable. Two other areas, zoning types that we've had in Mountlake Terrace that I've been concerned about that haven't worked are 4800 and the transition zone. Am I correct in assuming that we're replacing those zones by going the R1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So we're actually replacing the 72, 84, 72, 48 transition zones and putting in place the R1 through 4 instead. Very good. And then, so I guess in addition to the feasibility and ensuring that they actually get built, I'm also appreciate the incentivizing things like the tree retention and the connectivity those areas. But I think it is, again, very important to be asking the development community, how do we make that feasible? And, what kinds of incentives do they need to ensure that these things are put in place? Aside from that, I think the other areas that is probably more the administrative, and we'll probably be talking more about it when we get to the housing action plan. But the administrative side of things like form-based codes, utilizing form-based codes, and how we're planning the different higher density nodes and where those are going. So I think I'm anxious to see the maps when we start putting the R1 through 4 in place, see where those maps are, and particularly focusing on key areas where we really want to see more intense development in certain intersections that are, higher traffic, higher opportunity for higher density housing. So I'm really excited about this, really appreciate all the work that's being done on this, and look forward to continuing to work to get this accomplished.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see anyone else with their hands up. Yes, I'm really excited, so get to the next step here. Hopefully condos will be part of that in the future.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I don't see anyone else, so what?
I was just going to, can we have our own city laws that preclude the state liability laws?
Yeah, no one can sue here over condos.
We can just do condos that are Mountlake Terrace condos.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that is it.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much.
5-minute break? Okay. So we'll be back at 8:45.
Thank you, Mayor. 5 minutes break, so we'll be back at, is that 8:46?
Okay, thank you. All right, we're back in session. And next is our presentation of the 2024 year-end report by the police, excuse me, by the police department. Police Chief Pete Kaw and Commanders Mike Haynes and Scott King.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. We're 3 months into 2025, so it's timely. We're going to give you the 2024 year-end report. This year-end report reviews goals along with analysis of our progress toward attaining those goals. Additionally, the report presents 2024 crime statistics, calls for service, traffic enforcement efforts. Overall, the city's seen a decrease in burglaries, auto theft, vehicle prowls, and retail theft. However, we experienced a slight increase in violent felony crimes in 2024. Crime numbers involving domestic violence have also increased. The report discusses city demographics with additional analysis of enforcement actions by race. We've concentrated a great deal on recruiting a new generation of police officers, and that is ongoing. Our major focus in 2024, we continue to look for the best and brightest. Cultural diversity is always a priority as well. Department training programs are discussed in the report as well as overall community outreach and the embedded social worker program. First slide is obviously our mission statement. I have it before you in virtually every report. You've read it many times. The next slide, isn't that a lovely picture? I actually had hair and it wasn't gray. So we're going to redo our pictures because this is a picture. In fact, I think I was a commander or a deputy chief when this picture is taken, so it's probably a bit dated, but I sure like it better than the way I look nowadays looking in the mirror, but I think you'll probably all agree with that. We're going to go over, I promised you we'd go over Rickover's rules again, because at least we have one new council member since the last time we looked at it. I won't belabor some of the other issues, but I do a lot of reading about leadership, and one of the fellows that really impressed me, not least because they allowed him to stay in the Navy until he was 85 years old, which is pretty rare. Typically those fellows have to retire by the time they're 65, but Admiral Rickover was quite an individual. He was the father of the nuclear Navy. It continues to have an excellent safety record despite the highly complex and dangerous nature of their mission. He developed and officers shared his 7 rules for success. My father, who's a nuclear engineer, had the pleasure of working for him, and he said if you did a really good job, he was a good guy, but if you didn't do a really good job, you really didn't want to run into him in the hallway. So that's kind of my kind of management. If you're doing a good job, I'll leave you alone. If you're not, I'm going to be your best friend every day. So anyway, he had 7 rules, which he's willing and willing to share, and I've shared them in many cases with our supervisors. You have to have a rising standard of quality over time, well beyond what is required for the minimum standard. People running complex systems have to be highly capable. Supervisors have to face bad news when it comes and take problems to a level high enough to fix those problems. I think all of us in any industry can probably agree with that, number 3. You must have a healthy respect for the dangers and risk of your particular job. That really speaks well to police work. Training must be constant and rigorous. I think we probably meet that method and goal in spades. You have to have a robust auditing process to ensure that what you say you're doing, you are in fact doing. That's our yearly accreditation. The organization members must have an ability and willingness to learn from the mistakes of the past. I think we probably embody all those rules, and hopefully if I ran into Mr. Rickover in the hallway, he wouldn't give me a hard time. So that's one of my goals. Nothing better than this has come down the pike yet, and it's somewhat dated. 2015, President Obama came up with our goals philosophy about 21st century policing. I won't go over the steps. It's probably before you every time, but we still have that hanging on a wall, and we'll continue to do so. Some department goals. We provide a safe community for everyone. We utilize our resources effectively. We continue to use our unmanned vehicle program in an effort to leverage technology. Time, distance, and shielding is important for us. It makes everyone safe. The program uses unmanned aerial vehicles to provide time, distance, and shielding. We emphasize traffic DUI enforcement. We just assigned a full-time traffic officer to day shift when we rolled up the K-9 program for various reasons. We took that special position, created a traffic enforcement officer. He works day shift and has been doing a lot of good work. We leverage our resources by embedding a detective in the U.S. Marshals Violent Offender Task Force. Just this last week, they worked regionally with some drug enforcement units and took a ton of narcotics, money, and guns off the street. So that's a resource we can call to help us out. We do it all the time. We focus on community-oriented policing and outreach, continue to utilize the embedded social worker program. There'll be some mention about this later in the program. We continue to provide and promote outreach like cops and clergy. Sergeant Porter right now is managing that program. We utilize the e-bike program to make community contacts. Now that the weather's nice, you'll see those folks out on electric bikes. Those things are pretty fun to ride. Work collaboratively with regional law enforcement agencies, participate in the regional intelligence group. This morning, Commander King and I attended the Chiefs and Sheriff meeting up in Everett. So we work with our regional partners, including the FBI, Homeland Security, and various other agencies to just keep everybody informed about what everybody else is doing. And I think we mentioned just a few minutes ago about the United States Marshals Violent Offender Task Force, force multiplier. We incorporate education, long-term solution strategies for enforcement. We work with other departments to maintain a clean and inviting environment. I think I mentioned just a few moments ago, our recruiting and retaining quality personnel, replacing retirement community members, department members. We maintain high standards for personal selection, provide opportunities, new challenges for personnel. Part of my mentoring philosophy is to push folks into the areas they're not comfortable in. Make them come to council, make them make public speeches, make them conduct training sessions. It's just part of the growth process. If you keep doing what you're good at and comfortable in, you'll never grow. I need to push you into areas that you're not unsure yourself in, and as soon as you succeed in that area, it's another mark in your plus column. Focusing on succession planning, developing the next generation of leaders, maintain auditing systems, Spider Tech. We'll talk about in the presentation, command review of all critical incidents, any use of force, any high liability incident is staffed all the way to the police chief. I have to sign off, as both the commanders do. Accreditation, auditing, and compliance, Lexipol, which is our automated manual, updated department manual. We operate a comprehensive and robust in-service training program. Well, again, we'll focus on that later in the presentation. And we focus on finding candidates of differing backgrounds and diverse communities. That's been a real success this year. We like to remain regional leaders and set an example for modern policing. We listen to community feedback. We update and modify our policies. Our policy is online. Anybody can read it that looks at our website. Develop and promptly instruct internal training programs consistent with legislative mandates. We focus on fostering a culture of partnership. We're as transparent as possible. We can't be transparent about everything all the time, but we do our best. We recognize community supports trust, and trust is paramount to our success. We try to be proactive in incorporating improvements and efficiencies in lieu of a wait-and-see approach, and of course, we maintain fiscal responsibility. If you notice, there's another picture. He actually had hair in this picture, so
more than I got now.
I will pass it on to Commander Haynes.
Good evening. I'm Mike Haynes, and I'm going to give you an overview of the Patrol Division from 2024. Overall, the numbers in 2024 remain fairly consistent with what we've seen in recent years. Reports were down about 15%, which allowed officers a little bit more discretionary time to go out and do some traffic emphasis and things like that, which is why you see higher numbers with traffic stops and some of the other self-initiated type activities. Here we take a closer look at some of the common property crime categories. There was a significant reduction in burglaries, vehicle prowls, and thefts. I attribute much of the reduction to our continued efforts of visible policing in addition to recent legislative changes as it pertains to vehicle pursuits. As you'll see later, our pursuits did not increase, but the understanding we may pursue is often enough to dissuade many would-be individuals from committing these types of offenses. Patrol continues to make DUI enforcement a priority. These numbers are also bolstered by our participation in the grant-funded Washington Traffic Safety Commission emphasis patrols. The work of our officers continues to improve the overall safety of our community. Unfortunately, as Chief said earlier, we saw an increase in violent crimes in 2024. Much of the increase can be attributed to domestic assaults. Although we saw a higher percentage increase, the actual numbers remain low for a community our size in the Puget Sound region. Overall, Mountlake Terrace continues to be a very safe community. Domestic violence. As I mentioned in the last slide, there was a significant increase in domestic violence-related felony assaults. Our response to domestic offenses continues to be a priority. Our domestic violence coordinator is proactive in dealing with victims and in her work to try and break the cycle of violence, in addition to working with prosecutors to ensure accountability. 2024 critical activity analysis, use of force. 2024 saw 27 force incidents and 59 individual force incidents. This means there is actually usually more than one officer present during each of the 27 force encounters. This is intentional, as it often prevents a potential force incident from even taking place, and routinely reduces the amount of force necessary to effect an arrest. All force used in 2024 was non-lethal and typically only requires strength to overcome resistance. Here you see the number of force applications per officer and the type of incident that they had responded to during the force incident. The profile of individuals who most commonly resisted arrests are 36 to 45-year-old men and are routinely under the influence of intoxicants. As always, our force incidents undergo an extensive review process at the administrative level. All force incidents in 2024 were determined to be lawful and within department policy. 2024 vehicle pursuit overview. As I mentioned earlier, the law governing police pursuits was loosened recently. However, we continue to have very strict policy and procedure expectations as it relates to our involvement in these events. Last year, we engaged in a total of one vehicle pursuit. The driver in this event was heavily intoxicated and represented a significant risk to our community. Officers involved in this pursuit used an intervention technique to immobilize the vehicle as soon as possible and safely took the driver into custody with no injury to anybody involved. worries. We received a total of 5 complaints in 2024. Each of these were thoroughly investigated and determined to be unfounded. When you consider the fact that officers responded to over 21,000 incidents, the small number of overall complaints is a testament to our officers, our culture of community, and the overall quality of service each officer provides on a daily basis. Bias-based policing is strictly prohibited, and in 2024, there were no accusations of bias. This represents our demographics. And finally, last slide for the operations division is our enforcement numbers by race. With that, I'll turn it over to Commander King.
Also a younger picture myself. So, technology overview. The Unmanned Aerial Systems program continues to grow. Several additional small drones were added to the fleet. The department began transition to Axon mobile audio video systems in the fleet vehicles. The department replaced aging radar equipment with new radar equipment, and the department continued to utilize SpiderTech platform, which I will talk about in the next slide. The less lethal impact weapons were updated using modern sighting equipment and placed in each patrol vehicle. So SpiderTech enables law enforcement to automatically send one-to-one text messages, emails, and mobile-friendly surveys to crime victims, reporting parties, and other members of the community. These messages are triggered by RMS and CAD data. Command staff reviews the responses from the community, addresses any issues, and we're also able to see very nice responses about our officers. This is a snapshot of our organizational chart. Staffing overview. The department maintains a high standards for employment candidates and conducts extensive background investigations exceeding state requirements. The department recognizes the importance of keeping staff well-trained and qualified. We maintain a robust training program to contribute to the development of personnel and in consideration of succession planning. Staffing overview continued. Officer Zarnik on the left successfully graduated from the Washington State Basic Law Enforcement Academy and was assigned to patrol. Officer Ostrovkin on the right was hired as a certified lateral and was assigned to patrol as well. For staffing overview, Officer Ratliff was accepted to the Drug Regional's Recognition Certification Training course and is now a certified drug recognition expert, which helps us out quite a bit with our drug DUIs. Officer Allensor in the center was hired as a certified entry-level police officer and is assigned to patrol. Sergeant Porter instructed patrol tactics at the police skills refresher training throughout the year. Department training. As mentioned earlier, we continue to have a robust training program. Officers are required to complete a minimum of 24 hours of training each year. This is mandated by the state. Our officers typically at least double the minimum state requirement. The police department has certified instructors in defensive tactics, patrol tactics, crisis intervention, emergency driving, taser, impact munitions, bullet wrap, and firearms. The police department provides generalized training through the use of webinars, training bulletins, and shift briefing training. The police department had several training accomplishments in 2024. I'll highlight some of those. Animal Control Officer Rivera graduated from the Animal Control Academy. Officers completed Diversity, Equity, Inclusion 1 and 2 training. Officers were recertified in state patrol tactics training, which is mandated by the state. Officers qualified in yearly firearms training. Our newest detective attended basic homicide investigation, and peer support officers attended the First Responders Wellness Conference. Tammy Custer is our property technician. She processed 1,160 pieces of evidence taken in and destroyed 2,080 pieces that were no longer needed. Danielle Singsung is our domestic violence coordinator. There were 379 domestic violence calls for service, resulting in 218 criminal DV cases. Danielle also assists detectives in obtaining medical records, contacting victims with case updates, scheduling forensic interviews, and many other tasks related to victims of violent crimes. Danielle also helped me set up the Blue Bridge project, which I will talk about later. Joey Worthen is our police management analyst. Her primary duties include research and cost analysis of budgets and producing budget reports for the chief, accreditation management and compliance auditing. She manages records within state retention schedules, addresses claims, restitution requests, and contracts, compiles annual reports and surveys. She coordinates purchasing for the department and maintains department website and public-facing documents. Records and animal control. The records unit continues to receive training from a variety of sources, to include Washington State Law Enforcement Information and Records Association and Washington Association of Public Records Officers. One of our records specialists, Marlena Moran, is now a certified public records officer, which took her over a year to complete. Records processed 2,500 cases, 253 collisions, 658 public disclosure requests, and animal control processed 44 cases and seven potentially dangerous dog hearings. Community outreach. The department continues to utilize community outreach program to provide services and basic necessities to individuals experiencing homelessness. The department partnered with Blue Bridge Alliance and was awarded a grant of $5,000 to cover startup costs. The Blue Bridge Alliance provides officers with debit cards, which are tied to the department's community supported fund. The program is run 100% through donations from the community. The funds enable officers to provide support to those in immediate need of assistance. This can be in the form of a meal, a hotel room for the night, clothing, gas, a car seat for a baby, or small vehicle repairs like taillights. The program is designed to help those in immediate need and to build trust between law enforcement and the community. The department continues to reach out to the community through programs like Cops and Clergy and the School Liaison Program. The police department participating in community events like National Night Out, Tour de Terrace, tree lighting, 3rd of July event, Make-A-Wish, Shop with a Cop, Primera's Safety Fair, and South County's Fire Safety Fair. In 2024, we lost our embedded social worker through Compass Health due to budgetary restraints. Fortunately, we were able to partner with the Linwood Police Department and the Snohomish County Outreach Team, or SCOUT, to reestablish the program. The new program is thriving, and we recently received a $7,500 grant to assist community members in need of services. In addition to SCOUT, we continue to partner with the Snohomish County Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, or LEAD. The detective unit is comprised of 1 detective sergeant, 3 detectives, and 1 additional detective assigned to the U.S. Marshals Violent Offenders Task Force. They are primarily responsible for the investigation of major felony crimes and work closely with our domestic violence coordinator. 102 cases were investigated by the detective unit in 2024. This is a breakdown of those cases. Open for questions.
Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Page.
Thank you. First of all, you know, the picture that you saw with me and the chief, he was saying something funny and I was just trying not to laugh. I really commend you on your on the number of, or lack of number of complaints, you know, that you all have had and what the outcome was. I think that's a testimony, you know, of doing a lot of things right. The 2 questions that I do have is, you know, what % of time is devoted in crisis intervention training? You do a lot of training.
I'd have to look up the exact hours, but we make sure that all of our officers get through that training. And then there's also training that they do that would be, like I talked about, the shift briefing trainings and trainings on the computer.
You know, and I'll be frank, the reason why I asked that question, you know, is because when I hear of, and I've got a lot of family and friends, and as you all know, you know, in law enforcement, and when I hear of, you know, training and certifications and crisis intervention and things like that, and de-escalation, there is typically, in my mind, a minimum amount of actual training that's occurring versus other things that they're getting trained in, you know, tactical stuff and things like that, where police officers tend to find themselves in situations where they need to be doing more crisis intervention than maybe other things. So that's why, you know, I'm curious about, with all the training that goes on and on and on and on, how much of that, is it a one and done? Does it go on? And is it, you know, continuous? You know, is it monitored? Because you do have groups of people who sometimes take the training, one, because it's mandatory, two, because, well, I just got to get through it because I'm going to get paid, and three, or because they really want to do it because it's helping them, you know, better themselves as law enforcement officers as well as the community. So I'm always curious as to where, you know, the percentage actually really falls into those categories, and, you know, and how much of it is being done so that that number can shift, you know?
Sure. So it is continuing. It's a continuing education thing. I mentioned earlier where all all our patrol officers and detectives, we got recertified in patrol tactics. It's a 3-day class, and a large portion of that class does include that topic.
Yeah. And the other question I have is, if you remember, if you were there in one of the community communications when we had over at the cross in the police department there, one of the things that came out or that was requested, you know, during the discussions was more, I guess I want to say transparency, but in a good way, you know, from the department to the community, because the community don't know what you're doing, all the good things that you're doing. And it came out, well, why aren't you out there marketing yourself to the community, all the various different things that are going on, so that they know, you know, what we're hearing tonight, you know, all the good numbers and the people that's been brought in and things like that. Has that changed yet?
We're starting to work on that a little more with our communications manager, and we have talked about that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all three of you. Nice to see you. Appreciate the presentation. Very grateful that we continue to live in a very safe community, and definitely feel that and hear that from our residents regularly. So thank you for all of your work continuing to maintain and build that trust that helps you to do that so well. Particularly kudos on the Blue Ridge program. I'm super excited when you come back next to tell us about some of the successes and the things that you're seeing with it, because I think we've heard just little bits thus far, and I'm really excited that you brought that forward as an option, and that seems to be working out so well, and continuing to add tools in your tool belt to support the community in the way that they need to be supported. So thank you for all of that work. I mean, I'll name, in looking at those statistics, it's really hard to see that, you know, some of the least safe places for our residents are in their own homes and on the roads. And so I guess I will just sit with that, but also appreciate that we are dedicating resources to supporting folks, you know, with our domestic violence coordinator, with an additional focus on traffic enforcement, with that role being reallocated to that work, and also with the additional focus with the patrol team having more time this last year to do more in traffic enforcement. Clearly, we saw that in DUI numbers. I don't assume that it's just people are drinking way more this year and choosing to drive after doing so, but that, you know, you are out there more ensuring that folks that aren't safe to be behind the wheel aren't doing so. So thank you for all of those efforts. It's appreciated. I did have a question. I really appreciated the transparency of you sharing the number of force applications per officer. I think that is, again, I think you guys always come with transparency and appreciate that you share that and recognize that we look at each of those force of application. You can tell it's getting late. Appreciate that we look at each of those, right, and assess, whether that was an appropriate use of force. But I guess I'm curious in looking, I'm always interested in patterns, right? Do you look at, if you have an officer that has a significant number more than maybe somebody in a similar role, and that is something that happens year after year after year, do you track that sort of thing to be able to look for those patterns where there might be an issue in terms of, or at least an opportunity, maybe not an issue, because again, you look at each of those incidents, but where there's, do you keep an eye out for patterns? And if so, what do you do if you see a pattern?
Actually, that's part of the early warning system for that particular thing. If you have an officer that has 2 or 3 times the application of force, there's probably a reason for that, and it's not always a good reason, let's face it.
Yeah.
But obviously, there are some factors that do influence that. Typically, use of force occurs more at night.
Sure.
So officers who work night shift are going to have more applications of force statistically than people who work day shift, although it's not always true. But you're absolutely right. We do look for patterns. If there's someone that stands out, the next question is why, what's going on? There may be a reasonable explanation during that time, but if that's a pattern that continues over months, years, and we have a problem we need to deal with, and that's one of the things we look for. So yes, long answer to your short question. Yes, we do pay a lot of attention to that.
Or a short answer to deciphering my very long question. So thank you. I appreciate it. And just, congratulations to all the new staff. It's exciting to continue. I know we talked a lot about recruiting when I started, and I had lots of questions there, and just appreciate all of the work that's gone into continuing to make sure that we have a staffed force and that it's reflective of the community that you serve. And I will say, to give the chief kudos, he was working his recruiting game earlier this evening. We had a 4-year-old here who pretty sure that he told him that he could have a real badge. So I was going to say, how old do you have to be an officer? I was going to say, I feel like he's coming back in like 14 years or so.
Yeah, he's quite precocious. I told him a badge. He looked at me and says, I don't want a sticker. I want a real badge. But I did get a commitment from him that he's going to take the police test instead of the firefighter test. So that's a big deal right there. So
I love it, getting the commitments young. So just, again, appreciate all of the community-centric work that you do. It makes a difference. So thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll keep mine short, although I do think it's funny. I was just reaching in this pocket, and the thing I want to talk about is in my pocket, which is always to thank you, gentlemen, for your leadership as sincerely as I possibly can. I wanted to go back and give an example because you said, although you used our colleagues here as the example of putting them in situations that they may or may not want to do, present to council, I wanted to acknowledge 2 things. One, the last time we were together, which was about 2 weeks ago, we had a resident of Linwood actually come and give high praise of 2 of our officers. If you haven't had a chance to hear that, please go back and listen to it. We do nothing but damage to try to say any more than that. But he talked about 2 officers, and he gave one in particular a lot of attention. I want to give the other officer a little bit of attention here, which is Sergeant Porter. I had the genuine honor, and this was probably 2 weeks ago as well, of sitting with Sergeant Porter and his family at the Support 7 fundraiser. I bring that up to just say it was truly a proud Mountlake Terrace moment. If you don't know Support 7, just know basically the chaplains. I'm doing them a disservice by reducing their work to that. But they come alongside the first responders, take care of the first responders and the families or whoever's in this incident. A very important role. But where I'm going with that is Matt had a very significant part in this. And I just, as one who does a lot of talks, giving an entire day tomorrow of emceeing, just how impressive that is and how poised he was. And it was just wonderful to see not just his name, but Mountlake Terrace's name up there as well. I shared that with the city. I just realized I didn't get you the write-up, but nonetheless, that's because it's been a busy couple weeks. But just wanted to acknowledge, that there's a whole lot of work that you all are doing. Again, we had a resident come and give a wonderful 5 minutes of what that can look like. But I also want to give an example of what people don't know, because you have to go to a fundraiser to even see that. I didn't even know I was sitting at his table. And I sit there with his brothers and his dad. Everybody looked exactly the same, for what that's worth. They all look like they should just be police officers, which is just funny. But nonetheless, just a lovely opportunity. But again, to sit with his family, see their beaming faces, know what we were talking about, And again, just to know he had a significant role that he may or may not have wanted, which is just to say, you know, he did you proud, did us proud as a city. That's all.
Okay, Mayor, oh, Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Ditto also, thank you very much for keeping our community safe. And I really appreciate the weekly reports that are sent to the city manager and that we get, so we could take a look here on any hot spots that are in our city, and maybe where I heard some noises, and I could look up some streets here where I heard some noises or fire engines or things. So I appreciate that too, so thank you.
All right, now Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you. First and foremost, I mean, you guys have done an amazing job of keeping our community safe, in large part due to your leadership, as well as it reflects our officers on the streets and what the work that they do and how tremendous they are at being proactive and being visible in a community and building trust with our residents. That has played a huge role, I think, in creating the safe place that we live in and one that we can be confident in. That said, public safety encompasses a number of different moving pieces, and law enforcement and our police is just one piece of it, and which you guys do a tremendous job. I'm increasingly concerned about some of the other aspects. There's the accountability and the diversion programs, our courts, our criminal justice system, our courts, the public defenders, and prosecutors, legal services, I guess. And I mean, and I'm looking forward to having a broader conversation about public safety, and understanding what's working, what's not working, understanding the costs, why, for instance, and this is not a condemnation. I mean, the public defense is a legal right that I support, absolutely. But why does it cost almost twice as much to defend the same person we're prosecuting? So I guess I've got questions about the system and why it works the way it works and the costs involved and what in the courts, the criminal justice system, the court side of it, how that's functioning. We had a great presentation, by the way, last week from a couple of the judges from this area, and talking about the role that the courts play. And I think it's well worth our time delving into that and understanding that. We're paying it, but we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about it and understanding it. We pay these, we adopt it in our budget, but we rarely understand the inner workings and what we're paying for and why we're paying as much as we do. And more concerning, these growing costs, particularly the legal services side. So I think it's important for us to understand that. I think it's also, I appreciate the conversation about the intervention and the diversion programs. I mean, so there's accountability on one side, and what may or may not be working. Another problem is we don't have enough prosecutors to prosecute the crimes, let alone the public defenders, to defend the people going through the system. And so there's an accountability aspect to it that we need to explore and understand, and what's working there. So once you guys do your job, it goes to the criminal justice system. How is that working? And I remember your last quarterly presentation, and we had some case incidents about the girl that there's a huge societal breakdown. I think we need to start looking at the societal breakdowns and why this is happening, and how people posting things on social media. I mean, what is wrong with society when that's happening? Nobody's saying anything, and where is the accountability? But then on the other side of that is the diversionary programs. I think we're doing a great job. I really appreciate the social embedded program, Cops and Clergy, the Blue Ridge. Those are key pieces that I'm very excited that we're we're supporting, but I think there's more things we need to explore. During our regional collaboration meetings, we've talked about the RACER program, the Regional Crisis Response Program that North King County has, and looking at how we might be able to be incorporating programs like that. South County Fire has a great program that we should hear more about, and what they do, because oftentimes people that are in crisis, is the fire department that's responding. And they've got a program in place that is well worth us exploring more and understanding more, and how that and where the holes are. We're having another regional collaboration meeting coming up, South County Regional Collaboration meeting coming up next month, where we're going to be hopefully talking a little bit more about that, getting a report back from the South County Fire about their program and what is working and where the holes are that the RACER program covers, and how we might be able to beef up that side of the thing. So I think that's another key aspect. But again, really understanding the other side of the criminal justice system and how that's working. Again, accountability and the diversion programs, and looking at society as a whole, and what do we need to be doing to change the dynamics. You talk about the safety. The place that is less safe is in your own home, domestic violence. So again, it's getting back to understanding why are these dynamics taking place and how do we change those dynamics. So looking forward to having, and the other part of it. So I think a key piece of what first of all, us understanding all of the different aspects, but then we as a South County region really need to put together a plan. We're paying sales taxes, 1/10 of 1% of our sales tax for affordable housing and for mental health is going to the county. What are we seeing of those dollars that's going to the county here back in the South County region? And how can we as a South County region start stepping up and utilizing those dollars in our area? But to do that, we need to have a plan, because there's a process in place, and the county is dispersing those dollars, but we need to have a plan for what we want to do to change those dynamics, and how we can go to the county and ask for those dollars to be able to serve our residents. So, thank you.
Anyone else? So I really urge you to 2 weeks ago, to listen to the comment that was made about our police staff. And I'm just trying to remember the name of the officer that he was. No, the other one.
It was Sergeant Porter and Officer Russell.
Officer. Okay. And that was Wally Webster. So it's have them listen to it, because it was such a great compliment. All right. I guess that is it then. Thank you so much. And now we have the review of the second lodging tax advisory committee allocation recommendation with Jeff Betts. 100 pages.
15-page PowerPoint. 50.
Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I'm Jeff Betts, the Recreation Parks Director of the city. Yes, I will stop this. In tonight's agenda item, we're going to review the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's recommendation for the second allocation for the 2020-25 hotel motel tax funds. So the city has allocated lodging tax funds for many years, and that's based on one hotel in the city limits. Studio 6 Hotel, located in the Gateway neighborhood, collects these hotel motel taxes per state law. The city budgeted $50,000 annually for the 25 and 26 budget. The committee for the 2025 Lodging Tax Advisory, the 2025 Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, was appointed by council this past November and January. Per state law, the committee is comprised of 2 representatives of businesses that are required to collect a hotel motel tax, 2 people who are involved in activities that are authorized to be funded by that tax, and then 1 elected official who serves as chairperson of that committee. So the 2025 committee members are Councilmember Laura Sonmore, who's the chairperson, Travis Romine, he's the area general manager of IQON Hospitality, David Cavazos, chief operating officer of IQON Hospitality, Bonnie Mercer from Friends of the Arts, and Dale Newman from the Nile Shriners. So those funds can be used, in summary, for tourism, marketing and operations of special events and festivals, operations of tourism-related facilities owned or operated by nonprofit organizations, as well as operations and capital expenditures of tourism-related facilities owned by municipalities or public facility districts. So earlier this year, in the first allocation of funds, there were 2 funding applications that were received by the city, and those applicants requested a total of $50,000, which was the same amount that was budgeted. Friends of the Arts submitted a request of $15,000 and $10,000 was awarded. The Mountlake Terrace Chamber of Commerce submitted a request of $35,000 and $20,000 was awarded. So the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee recommended allocation to both Friends of the Arts as well as that Chamber of Commerce recommendation for a total of $30,000. So $30,000 of the $50,000 that were budgeted. Council approved those allocations on February 20th. In addition, Council also gave direction to staff to open another round of funding to prospective events based on that additional $20,000 still available in the budget. So here we are for the second allocation. So there were 2 additional applications in this second allocation that were received. The applicants requested a total of $70,000. So that was $50,000 over the remaining budgeted amount. MLT Cares submitted a request of $50,000 to help fund marketing, rentals of tables and chairs, and other operations of the MLT Festival, which was to be held July 18th through 20th. And then also Forest Property PNW submitted a request of $20,000 to help fund the Lowell Shields Disc Golf Tournament with the date to be determined. So a little bit about those 2 applicants. MLT Cares is the group running the title of the event is called MLT Festival, and this is essentially a replacement event for the retired Tour de Terrace event. And it would not be identical, but it has some of the familiar elements that we're used to with the parade and different vendors and food vendors and crafts and those kinds of things and live bands. They estimated 25,000 people in attendance for their first year. And a lot of their funding was requested due to they don't have all the same infrastructure items that Tour de Terrace had, such as tables, chairs, and tents. They also needed to fund advertising and security in addition. So the Forest Property PNW for Lowell Shields Disc Golf Tournament requested $20,000. This was startup funds, really essentially for marketing and some infrastructure improvements to the course. They estimated a few hundred in attendance for this new event. So the criteria for awarding for Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, to follow state law, they would need to figure out whether the applicant submitted a complete application in a timely manner, whether permitted use of lodging tax funds, whether it was a permitted use, and then also whether the proposed expenditure increased overnight visits, including off-season visits, or create a positive economic impact. In addition, they need to determine whether the applicant demonstrates a need for the funding by submitting a complete budget and financial statement information and show a demonstrated shortfall in expenditures. And then, in addition, they're supposed to apply for, if applicable, other grant funding and sponsorships to make up that project shortfall. So state auditors have recommended that lodging tax funds be used for programs and events that reach an audience beyond Mountlake Terrace to generate those overnight stays in the city, since the funds come from overnight stays. The city's application and the state's reporting measures require an estimate of visitors traveling 50 miles or more to the event. So the LTAC recommendation that came out of the review, which was held on April 17th, recommendation was that they believe that both applicants meet the criteria to generate overnight stays and create an economic or other community benefit. They recommended that MLT Cares be allocated $19,500 and Forest Property PNW be allocated $500 for the total of the $20,000 left in the budget. So for council action, under state law, the council may award only the LTAC recommended amounts to all, some, or none of the applicants on the LTAC list. The city council can't adjust funding amounts without resubmitting their request to LTAC to review that. If council desires to allocate funds for any entity not on the list or change the recommended amounts, they must submit their request to LTAC for further recommendations. So tonight, this is just review of this item, and staff recommendation is that council move to vote on the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's recommendation for lodging tax funding and authorize city manager to execute a tourism promotion agreement with MLT Terrace and Forest Property PNW for those aforementioned programs and events for the year 2025. And it can also be accomplished by adding it to May 1st, next week's consent agenda. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Comments? Mayor Pro Tem Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I appreciate the committee going back and taking a second look and adding the second round and being able to allocate some additional dollars, and certainly support this. I guess I'm just interested in hearing a little bit more about the two applicants, and I'm particularly interested in the Frisbee Golf, which had requested a lot of money, and we allocated 500, and trying to understand what I guess I didn't understand what the dynamics are of providing the 500 to be able to help them conduct their tournament, and are they able to conduct the tournament with our $500 support, or are they going to need to come back and relook at that, or how can that work? I mean, are they really relying on funding from the city, or are they going to be able to put something on? I mean, I like the idea, and I'd like to be able to support it. I'm interested in hearing more about how it's going to work or not work.
Yeah, they submitted a full budget, and it should be in the council materials too for part of their application. They do have other funding sources. Okay. And so, I mean, without speaking directly to talk about that agreement moving forward, I would anticipate they could run a tournament. It just wouldn't be on the scale that they're planning. They're talking about like cash prizes for winners and really making it kind of a large event where people travel all over from to participate in. So I'm guessing they would be able to run an event. It just would be in smaller scale.
Great. And I'm very excited about the new round of the former Tour de Terrace, the Mountlake Terrace Festival. I think that's exciting for our community. So looking forward to moving forward with that. Thank you.
Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. And just so we know that we asked the question, and it's along those same lines, the 19.5 versus the 500. Perhaps I misunderstood, but it sounded like, if I read the application correctly, Dale Newman is the same Dale Newman that's on the committee. So I'm going to trust you did whatever you needed to do to keep him sequestered out of the process. So if somebody looks back and says, well, that looks like you did it because he's on the committee, you already have that airtight. So just making sure the council recognizes it too, but we trust that there was a process in place. If you want to say yes, that'd be great.
Yes.
Okay, so this will be on the right. All right. So if anyone doesn't have anything else to say, we'll just we'll be voting on it next week.
Thank
and you. Next is Carolyn Hope. So next is a review of the city performance measures.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. We're here tonight to share the updated performance measures that we discussed originally at the City Council retreat in March. The goal of the performance measures is to reflect the strategic plan of the City Council, the adopted budget, to make sure they're SMART goals, that we can measure them, they're specific, they're achievable, they're relevant, and time-bound. and also to measure regulatory compliance and progress towards operational goals or levels of service. So we had a pretty robust discussion about these at the retreat, so we won't go through them in detail, but I did want to highlight that the attachment that's provided to you tonight, it includes the proposed performance measure, which department it resides in, the data that we will be gathering to measure progress, what our baseline data is, and what our goal is. And then it also has some columns that reflects which council goals those performance measures relate to. And it shares a little bit of information about what we'll do to achieve the goal and why the goal is important. We had very few edits, just some minor editorial edits, but I just wanted to highlight that we did remove the traffic accident performance measure. We had a pretty good discussion about that at the retreat. We had a number associated with it, which was last year's traffic accident number, and there was a request by council, why couldn't that be 0, like some of the safety protocols nationwide to have a target 0. We felt like we were still in process of reviewing traffic accident data and what we can do to improve those situations. So to have a reasonable target that we can do something about, we felt like we didn't have a good set of data yet, but we will revisit that in the future. We had a little bit of conversation about whether there should be performance measures on financial policies, and there was a discussion about that might be better to have rolled into our quarterly financial reports to City Council so we can get into more discussion about the changes and fluctuations related to those. And then we also had a bit of a conversation about whether we should have a performance measure related to the number of residents that use our recreation pavilion. And we, staff offered that maybe we come back at another time and have a more robust conversation about that. It's a rather complex topic that includes priority for residents and registration potentially. We need to look at the impact of that on our cost recovery goals that council adopted many years ago, and just look at the whole picture a little more carefully before we make a performance measure around the number of residents versus non-residents at the recreation pavilion. So those were the high-level changes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the performance measures.
Councilmember Salmore?
Can you just tell me what you said you're thinking about removing financial policies from?
No. There was a discussion at the retreat about should we have a performance measure about financial policies? And we suggested that we just have we include measures related to the financial policies during our quarterly financial reports.
So can I ask, did we follow our financial policies that are in the back of the manual for the budget?
Yes.
Because I wrote the whole policy memo and I never got a response back to it. And then I sent it out to all the council about the policy memo, because if we were to follow the policy on finance policies, then our budget wouldn't be balanced.
I don't recall receiving a memo from you, Councilmember Sonmore.
Yeah,
I can go back and look, but I don't recall receiving it. Also, according to our financial policies, the budget that was adopted by this council for 25 and 26 is balanced.
So when will we get a report out of how much we spent over that wasn't budgeted for 2025 so far? Because I've counted about $400,000 at least.
From which sources?
From which sources?
Where have we overspent by 400,000?
There was $32,000 that we didn't account for Snohomish County. There were other financial that we've gone over for our budget that wasn't included in our budget. I don't have all of the ones listed in front of me, but I'm sure you could pull that up in your finance committee to see, because we used to get report outs of how we've gone over our budget. And
Sure, I'm happy to take a look. 400,000 seems like a pretty specific number, so if you have that and can send it to me, I'd be happy to look into it. Sure. I'm, as far as the information that I have, we have not overspent our budget by anywhere close to 400,000. But if you have different numbers, I'd be more than happy to take a look at those.
Councilmember Murray? It's okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate the thoughtful reflection of the conversations we had at the retreat and the updates, and I think those all make a lot of sense, so appreciate that very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, thank you. I do have some questions on particularly the numbers in economic development, community economic development. One is the number of new jobs created. The baseline is 209 and the goal is 86. I guess and is that per year?
That's per year, yes.
So we're actually, the baseline is 209 and we're looking to.
Yeah, add more jobs based on the Vision 2044 plan.
The baseline is 209 per year?
The baseline this past year was 209.
Okay, so, okay, all right.
So yeah, we could change the baseline to what the total number of jobs in the city is.
Well, no, I guess, yeah, I'm just curious why the baseline, so last year was 209 new jobs created, but the goal is so much less. Was it just an outlier year that?
We haven't, I can't say that I have gone back and looked at annual job growth per year, but we could take a look at that. It also might, it might be because we changed our business license protocols because it is based on business license data as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I mean, I'm not opposed to adopting this and amending it along the way, but I do have questions about that. And so 86 new jobs a year over the 20-year planning horizon gets us to the total number that we're planning on. Basically that's how you came up with the number 86, right?
Correct.
I was just curious about why last year was 209 and then our goal is less than when we're trying to encourage economic development. So it just was a curious number. It's not that it's necessarily the wrong number. I'm just curious in the dynamics behind it.
209, if I recall correctly, is just a single year's data point. I don't anticipate, or I would be shocked actually if we created 209 jobs every year over the previous decade. So the baseline is just that single data point.
But recognizing what all it's including, and I don't want to prolong this discussion. We can have this discussion later. But I guess, baseline is including home occupation, commercial, and non-rental property, so it's including X amount. I guess what I'd like to explore further is, there's attrition also, right? I mean, there's a net, so I'm assuming what we're looking for is a net increase of 86. And maybe the 209 doesn't include the net, and maybe it's a gross.
That's fair, and we can definitely dig into those numbers further and provide you with that info.
So yeah, I'd just be curious about that. And then likewise with the housing units built, we're looking at 289 housing units built per year, and that over a 20-year period would be roughly 6,000 homes, and that accomplishes our comprehensive planning goal for Vision 2044, right?
Yes.
That's the number that we derived that number based on X number of units that we know we're going to need. Okay. That's the main question I had about that. Thank you.
Okay, because I thought of it as net gain, that number. When I looked at it, was net gain, so.
Yeah, I just 209.
Okay. Is that it for that section? So next, we're going to go into the, review amendments to Mountlake Terrace Municipal Codes for receiving appeals.
Thank you, Mayor, and I know the hour is late, and this item actually is not too involved. Basically, what it boils down to is explained in the staff report, but basically what it boils down to is our current code requires that our city clerk be available to accept legal documents, summonses, things like that, which means Jennifer could never take a vacation day. Since we don't want that, and I'm sure she doesn't want that, we just want to change the language in the code a little bit to allow myself to designate other individuals to accept legal process documents. Basically what this boils down to, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Excuse me. Do we have a lot of legal documents coming in?
We don't, but 2 or 3 a month, I think is pretty average for what we receive. Sometime, one particular month we may get a bunch, but because we're ramping up our code compliance program and have been seen to make that program more effective, we're finding we're receiving more documents, which is where this issue came from.
All right, anyone have any questions? We're getting toward that 10 o'clock mark, so all right, so go ahead.
Just for us, my understanding, so when these legal documents come in, are they time sensitive?
Generally, yes. We have to respond within a certain number of days, depending on the venue. If it's a hearings examiner or Superior Court or District Court, they all have different time frames. So, yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Then we'll move on to, we're skipping number 12, and then, next is the council comments. Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep this quick. I just wanted to thank the city of Mountlake Terrace. They are serving as one of the sponsors for tomorrow's Leadership in Snohomish County Step Up, Moving Equity Forward. I alluded to it earlier. It'll be my 4th time emceeing, and so I look forward to seeing you all online, and I'll try to give a special shout out if you're in the chat.
Anyone else? All right. We don't want to extend this meeting, so I'll adjourn. Thank you.